Welcome. My name is Philip Lovejoy, and I'm the Executive Director of the Harvard Alumni Association. Thank you for joining us for this, the seventh event of our reunion series leading up to June. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. Please note that today's conversation is an off-the-record opportunity created for our reunioning Harvard alumni and Radcliffe alumni. We are using Zoom webinar today, so your camera and audio will remain muted. If you have questions for our speakers, please share it via the Q&A function so your question will be asked at the end of the presentation. It would be great for you to include your class here with your question. Closed captioning is available at the bottom of your screen. Today we have hundreds of Harvard and Radcliffe College alums with us who are celebrating their 5th to 75th reunions. We also have members of the Crimson Society representing those classes who have already celebrated their 50th reunion. Thank you for being with us today. I'm so excited about this program and that we are featuring the Radcliffe Institute. It's a real powerhouse at Harvard, and perusing their content reminds me of the days when I used to walk into a bookstore and wander the stacks looking for inspiration. Radcliffe is also a place that was near and dear to my father, who served on the board of Radcliffe and then the Dean's Council for many years. So I clearly have a soft spot for the Institute. I am now delighted to introduce today's speakers. Our moderator for today is Jessica Harris, a 1997 graduate of the college. Jessica is the producer and host of From Scratch, a weekly podcast about the entrepreneurial life. The show aired as a weekly series on NPR for over a decade. She's a member of the Radcliffe Institute Dean's Advisory Council, is on the board of the High Line, an elevated public park in New York City, which is fabulous, as well as a board member of Reds, a Montessori preschool. Today, Jessica will sit in conversation with Dean Tomiko Brown-Nagin. Tomiko Brown-Nagin is Dean of the Harvard Radcliffe Institute, Daniel P.S. Paul Professor of Constitutional Law at Harvard Law School, and member of the History Department at Harvard Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Dean Brown-Nagin is an award-winning legal historian and an expert in constitutional law and educational law and policy. Her full bio is linked in the chat. Today, Jessica and Tomiko will discuss a range of topics from current happenings at Radcliffe to the publication of Dean's new book, Civil Rights Queen, Constance Baker Motley and the Struggle for Equality. I'm thankful to you both for your time and your deep commitment to the alumni community. I asked Jessica earlier what had drawn her to the Institute. Among other things, she spoke of how Radcliffe has muscle and its role as an interdisciplinary engine for the university. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Jessica Harris to the virtual stage. Jessica, take it away.
Thank you so much, Philip, for that lovely introduction. I am enthusiastic about joining this virtual reunion series. I will be celebrating my 25th reunion, and I'm honored at the opportunity to join Dean Brown-Nagin in conversation. I just want to take the next moment to reflect on my personal involvement with Radcliffe. My first touch point with Radcliffe, even before it was an institute, was my sophomore year. I acted in a play called Orpheus Descending by Tennessee Williams at the Agassiz Theater. And so every day I was at the Agassiz Theater in Radcliffe Yard rehearsing, and I'll always remember a piano player practicing separately Pachelbel's canon. And so for the last 25 years, whenever I hear Pachelbel's canon, I am immediately brought back to that room overlooking our beloved yard. Fast forward 25 years, I have the honor of serving as a member of the Dean's Advisory Council, and I get to look under the hood of Radcliffe. And as Philip, as you said, I'm always impressed by the muscle that the Institute exerts. It's a real special moment for the Institute, where the clay of the Institute is still moist and it's still evolving as we shape it. And it's very forward thinking, yet we hear strongly the voices of all those giants who came before us. And we are standing on the shoulders of all those women and men who pioneered Radcliffe College, pioneering the way for a more inclusive life that we are perpetuating at the Institute. I just want to provide a brief overview of the discussion. We will be talking about the Institute, as well as Dean Brown-Nagin, your book, Civil Rights Queen, Constance Baker Motley, and the Struggle for Equality. But before diving into discussion, I'd like to kick things off with a video that that you, Dean Brown-Nagin, and your colleagues produced to commemorate the Institute's 20th anniversary at the start of the pandemic. I think we should just get started, Tomiko, on the conversation, and we could watch the video perhaps after our discussion.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'd love to begin our conversation with your sharing a personal reflection on how you came to lead the Institute, having started your career here as a fellow.
Sure, Jessica, I'm happy to talk about that. My scholarship is highly interdisciplinary. I am both a lawyer and an historian. My work sits at the intersection of constitutional law and social and legal history. And so I was delighted when in 2016, I was a fellow at Radcliffe, and I just loved the place. It was magical. The ability to talk to fiction writers and scientists and hear their thoughts about the world. It was just a wonderful place to be for me, and it really felt like home. And so when I had the opportunity to become the dean of the Radcliffe Institute, I was delighted to do so.
How have you continued to foster the Institute's evolution through your deanship?
Sure. As I said, Radcliffe was an extraordinary place when I arrived, thanks to the leadership of my predecessors, of course, Drew Faust, the founding dean of the Institute, Barbara Gross, and Liz Cohen, each of whom had done wonderful things to promote Radcliffe, with Drew really bringing together the Schlesinger Library, the Bunting Institute, and Radcliffe College itself into this amazing institute, and Barbara Gross doing so much to promote public programming at Radcliffe and to pursue cutting edge research, including in the sciences. And of course, my immediate predecessor, Liz Cohen, leading our first capital campaign, and thus helping to secure Radcliffe's future and also emphasizing the arts. And so when I came into the deanship at Radcliffe, I was interested in pushing it in ways that reflected, first of all, my training in the professions. I noticed by looking at the founding documents of the Institute that the professions were included among the subject areas that were to be represented at Radcliffe. And I thought that we could do a lot more to promote the professions like law and medicine and public health in the span of the Institute's fellowship class and our public programming. And we have been able to do that. At the same time, I wanted to think more profoundly about what an Institute for Advanced Study can be in our world, where we're confronted by so many pressing public problems, and having lawyers and doctors and public health scholars amidst the social scientists and artists and humanists was a way of pursuing the goal of making sure that we were inviting scholars to campus who could focus on climate change and educational access and health disparities and the number of other issues that confront us today.
And how has the pandemic changed your perspective on the Institute's work and reach, would you say?
Well, certainly at the Radcliffe Institute, like at Harvard generally, the pandemic has changed the way that we work. But I would say we have continued to be what we always were, which was a place where scholars could come together and, as I said, confront pressing issues. And in fact, I would say that the pandemic gave us an opportunity to achieve one of the goals of our strategic plan, which was to reach broader audiences, to make sure that We could reach people who, for instance, couldn't come to Cambridge at 4 o'clock on a Thursday to hear one of our great public programs. So through the virtual platform, we were able to reach thousands of people who tuned in to hear not only about programs having nothing to do with the pandemic, but also about health disparities. Obviously, the country has been going through a reckoning about race and injustice, and we offered a number of programs around mass incarceration. And so I think that the pandemic gave us an opportunity to underscore that we are nimble. We can meet the moment. We did meet the moment thanks to the hard work of our staff members and thanks to the patience of the fellows whose fellowship years were interrupted and then were virtual. And so we are coming out of the pandemic, I think, in a very strong position. We hope to come back to campus. We appreciate the in-person opportunities, but we're also going to continue to offer virtual programming in a hybrid fashion to ensure that all who are interested in the work that we do can participate.
Can we talk about Radcliffe Engaged, which is your sort of umbrella program that reaches all aspects of the Institute's work, which you began pre-pandemic, and it really has the ethos of inclusivity. Can you explain what Radcliffe Engaged is?
Sure. When I became dean, I wanted us to undertake a strategic planning process, which we did. Mm-hmm. It was a great way to get to know the Institute because we looked at the founding documents, we talked to any number of stakeholders, and we did bring in a firm to help us think through our direction. And Radcliffe Engage is really an ambitious program for what we should do over the next over the course of 5 years, and it focuses on making sure that we are reaching students, so really extending our reach into the student population through various modes of engagement, that we're building partnerships with community-based organizations, and that we're doing things like focusing on matters that are of great interest to us and to the world. So we have 2 focus areas, one of which is on law, education, and justice. It is a focus area that allows us to explore issues of mass incarceration and the impact on families and communities. And then we have a focus area on youth leadership, through which we launched a brand new program, Emerging Leaders, which focuses on gender and leadership. And it allows us to, of course, draw on the tremendous history of Radcliffe College and the history of women leaders, as well as the archives of the Schlesinger Library. We have high school students who are working with Harvard College students to learn about leadership using the archives of the Schlesinger. And it's really just a great opportunity to both continue the things that we have been doing so well at the Institute, while also shifting our focus a bit to meet new opportunities.
And you mentioned the Schlesinger. Could you provide an example of how it is pursuing new projects under the Radcliffe Engaged, I don't want to say auspices, but mission or program?
Sure. As I mentioned, the Schlesinger Library is integral to the Emerging Leaders program. We are drawing on the archives to teach students about leadership. And I think of Pauli Murray as an example of archival collections that are allowing us to introduce the students to the concept of leadership, but also to this tremendous historical figure. And then the other thing that the Schlesinger Library is doing, and which is consistent with Radcliffe Engaged, is to seek to diversify its collections by trying to ensure that conservative women are represented in our collections, and Asian American women are represented. I'm just delighted that the whole Institute is participating in this effort to make sure that we remain relevant.
What opportunities do undergraduates have to engage in the work of the Institute? You mentioned earlier, but can you dig into that a little bit more?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's one of the things that I'm most excited about, what's happening around Radcliffe. One of our key programs is the Radcliffe Research Partnership Program. And this is where undergraduates are able to partner with our fellows, who of course span the disciplines, to work on research that is of interest to them, and that also is helpful to the fellows. Another program that we have launched to ensure that we are providing even more experiential learning opportunities are Radcliffe Engaged grants, which give our students the resources to pursue their own innovative ideas and their own research. Emerging Leaders, which I mentioned, it's our mentoring program focused on gender and leadership that draws on Harvard College students. And it's just been a delight to see how both the undergraduates and the high school students who are involved are really feeding on each other and helping each other to grow and learn. And then through the Schlesinger Archives, students work there. They conduct research there, including in new collections like the Angela Davis collection. I mentioned Pauli Murray. It is incredibly meaningful to see students all over our campus.
You mentioned just the interaction also between the students and the fellows. What's an example of a project or a topic that might take it down from 10,000 feet into a more granular level of something that they're working on together?
Sure. Well, one of the examples that I can give you is of a fellow, James Sturm, who was a cartoonist at the Institute a couple of years ago, who had this project of wanting to create a comic book that would demystify the nation's healthcare system and the issue of access and disparities in the healthcare system. So Jim actually worked closely with 4 undergraduate researchers to create this comic book. And they supported the full scope of the project. They looked at the relevant literature, they helped to sketch a draft, they did copy editing, and James reflected a number of times on how amazing it was to have the support of these students who helped to generate new kinds of discussions about healthcare access. And in fact, I have a copy of the comic book that they created right here. It's fascinating. And maybe we can put a link to that comic book in the chat so that people can see one of the examples that really do show how important the students are to the fellows and to the Radcliffe community.
I'd love to follow those 4 students in life and see if their professional choices have been impacted by their experience with this fellow. It reminds me of another example of a student who worked with another fellow. He wanted to be an economics major. He worked with a linguist, I think, and now he's pursuing a concentration in linguistics instead of economics, which I applaud due to the influence of the relationship with the fellow. So,
well, I think there are many examples, Jessica, of how the undergraduates profit from having those relationships with the fellows. They're close relationships, they're mentoring relationships, they're impactful. I had a couple of research partners when I was a fellow, one of whom decided to go to law school. And this was a young woman who helped me on the book, the Constance Baker Motley book. And I was delighted to be able to, I actually wrote a letter of recommendation for her to attend law school. So that kind of dynamic happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Constance Baker Motley, I think it's time to shift to your book, unless the video is working. But I'm not getting the nod, so I'm just going to switch over to your book, Civil Rights Queen. And let's see, very, very interesting, especially given what's going on with the confirmation hearings. Why write a book about Constance Baker Motley? Why is she significant? And admittedly, I had no idea who she was before reading the book. So thank you for uncovering this tour de force for me. So.
Well, sure. Well, first of all, I have to say that this is a real Radcliffe book. I worked on it, as I was saying, when I was a fellow. I used the archives of the Schlesinger Library to conduct research that enabled me to place Constance Baker Motley within a network of women activists and lawyers. And of course, I released the book as Radcliffe Dean. And so I'm excited that as it happens, I have been able to publish a book about a woman leader from the perch of Radcliffe, which of course has as a part of its mission continuing to promote the study of women and gender. So the question, who was Constance Baker Motley? She was a lawyer who had tremendous impact. She was a civil rights lawyer who worked for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund for 20 years. For most of the time there, she was the only woman. And she helped to litigate scores of cases that really changed the legal architecture of this country, including Brown versus Board of Education, which of course is one of the most important cases in 20th century constitutional law. She represented Dr. King in Birmingham in one of the most important campaigns of the civil rights movement. She argued 10 cases in the US Supreme Court, winning 9 of them. And yet she's not as well known as she should be. And I think, Jessica, that it's really down to gender. As is true in history generally, in the civil rights history, there has been a focus on male leaders like Thurgood Marshall and Martin Luther King Jr. And certainly we should focus on those leaders, but we can do 2 things at once. So I wrote this book about Motley to ensure that she is considered one of America's great leaders, because she was. And she went on to be, after this career as a civil rights lawyer, appointed by President Johnson in 1966 to the US District Court in the Southern District of New York, making her the very first African-American woman federal judge.
And technically, her family's from Nevis. So her family didn't even identify as African American initially, right? Wasn't her father? Well, go ahead.
Yes. Well, a part of the story about the forces that shaped her, of course, it includes her family. They were immigrants to this country from the West Indies. They came from Nevis. And the experience of writing about Motley allowed me to tell a story about diversity in the African American experience. The father and the family in general, held themselves apart from the African American population. Her father, in particular, thought of himself and of West Indians as superior. He worked at Yale University as a chef, And the story I tell is about how he read the prestige of the young men whom he cooked for at Yale into himself. And although I think for a lot of people, the story about the conflict, you might call it, between African Americans and West Indies might be uncomfortable, it is something that's important to know and to talk about. And I will also say that when Constance Baker Motley was litigating cases in the South, where she experienced not only danger, but incredible instances of disrespect, the sense that she was superior, I think, provided her a shield of sorts, a protective shield. And so in some ways you can see that it was useful to her.
Fascinating. She accomplished so much during her lifetime. As you said, a lawyer, a judge, president of a borough president of Manhattan, wife and mother, and fit so much into her life. If I could do just one of those things, enough. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Right. So one of the themes in the book, or one of the subjects that I discuss, is about the balance. She was balancing being a wife and a mother and this incredible professional career. In fact, I note that she was pregnant and gave birth to her son, Joel, and then was a young mother with an infant and a toddler around the same time that the lawyers at the Inc. Fund were working on Brown versus Board of Education. And so that work required them to be in the office for very long hours and to really be devoted to the cause. And imagine what that juggling act was like. I think many of us can imagine, frankly, because as even Judge Jackson discussed at her confirmation hearings, it's still the case that it's difficult for parents and women in particular to juggle all of those responsibilities. And yet Motley did it. And it's important to know of her example.
And she was deft at balancing it, and also very socially nimble. Do you feel like you would be friends with her today if she were still alive? What did you, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things about her that were admirable. First of all, she made it a point of mentoring younger generations of students, of women judges. Of course, she had law clerks as a judge, and there's a chapter in my book where I discuss how she was both very demanding of them, but also kind to them, and gave them opportunities, including African Americans and other people of color and women who were overlooked by other judges. Those are vital opportunities that really launch young lawyers' careers. Those law clerks. She was very friendly to Associate Justice Sonia Sotomayor when she joined the district court in New York. And I love that she was the sort of person who, although she was the first, she ensured that she was not the last. That's really important to me personally. And for that reason and so many others, I would love to be friends with her. She was just phenomenal.
I have one last question before we open it up to the audience questions. I can't help but observe the impeccable timing of your book, given the Supreme Court confirmation hearings that you referenced earlier. And, you know, as I look at Judge Brown-Jackson, I wonder, like, in what ways Constance Baker Motley's pioneering civil rights actually hindered her own chances to becoming a Supreme Court justice?
That's a very good question, Jessica. Well, I will say that it did hinder her chances. President Johnson initially wanted to appoint her to the Court of Appeals, the Second Circuit, and there was incredible blowback against that idea. on the grounds that it would be too political to promote Thurgood Marshall and Motley at the same time, that there were too many questions would be raised about that Dole appointment. And also, she was subjected to a lot of criticisms on the grounds that her practice background somehow made her inappropriate for the federal bench. People asking questions about, could she be fair to white litigants? So one could say that her practice background was weaponized against her and impeded that initial appointment to the Second Circuit, and really followed her throughout her career on the federal district court, where she was subject, as many Black judges were, and women judges later, to recusal motions on the grounds that her identity made her problematic in sex discrimination cases, for instance. And so surely there were limitations, but the great thing about this moment is that it has finally arrived, that this African-American woman has been nominated and looks like she'll be confirmed to the US Supreme Court. And I think it's fantastic that in this country at this moment, we're validating the principle of equal workplace opportunity. It is a moment to celebrate.
On that note, I'd like to open it to questions from the audience. Let's see. First question, one moment. Okay. Can you talk about the Institute's ongoing commitment to gender and how it comes through programmatic work?
Happy to talk about that. It is a core commitment of the Institute. I will use this question as an opportunity to note that for Radcliffe Day this year, we will be honoring Sherilyn Ifill, who is a civil rights lawyer who has spent her life fighting for equality, litigating a number of landmark cases. She just stepped down as director counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which of course is also connected to Constance Baker Motley. Sherilyn is going to be in conversation with Martha Minow, the former dean of Harvard Law School, when she receives the Radcliffe Medal, and we'll have a panel which is about access to education and the need to meet, to have a diverse workplace, to meet the needs of the workplace today through education. What else do we do? Every year we have a gender conference. This year it's going to be on the subject of gender and comedy, which is a delightful subject to survey at this point, I think, in our experience as a country, as a nation. We, in our fellowship program, always have a majority of women represented, which is something a lot of people don't know. We seek to ensure that women are represented, those who are interested in gender and history, but also women who are scientists who do work that has nothing to do necessarily with gender. And so those are some of the ways in which we at the Radcliffe Institute are continuing our commitment to lifting up women leaders, and ensuring that here at Harvard, that goal is realized through the Institute, which of course is connected to the history of Radcliffe College.
Another question is, can you expand on the role of Roberta Irene Thomas?
Oh, Roberta Thomas. You mean the assistant to Constance Baker Motley? What a delightful question. So, and I believe this is the question that is being posed. Roberta Thomas worked with Constance Baker Motley for many years. They had a terrific relationship. Roberta would travel with Motley when she went to the Deep South often. They would stay together and experience the dangers that were incumbent in litigating those early cases challenging segregation at the NAACP, including, I tell a story in my book about how Motley, when she litigated her most famous case, which was the University of Mississippi case, Ole Miss challenge by James Meredith to segregation there. She and Medgar Evers and Roberta, to the extent that she was with them, would be followed by the police, the state police. And it was a horrifying experience, a frightening experience. And they were all in that together. And so Roberta was both an assistant or a secretary, as she would have been called in that day, but also a friend to Motley. And I'm delighted to be able to highlight her in this discussion of Motley's life and work.
Incidentally, are you still teaching? You have a freshman seminar, is that right? On top of everything?
That is true. I try to teach a freshman seminar every year. And I do it because of the point that I was making earlier. I feel so profoundly committed to mentoring students. And so I make the time to interact with the freshmen who are so intellectually curious. I teach a freshman seminar about the role of the court and social change. And it's just, it's a treat for me. I'm doing that now. I did it last year. And the students are just so grateful to have the opportunity to be in conversation with the professor in a more intimate circumstance, which of course is so important for the process of acclimating to Harvard, which is a big place.
What would you say you are most proud of? What are you proudest of as dean? Your work's not over, but.
Wow, that's sort of a hard question to answer, Jessica, because first of all, I'm proud to be the dean of the Radcliffe Institute. I am proud of the work that we're doing through our strategic plan. As I said, one of the goals of the strategic plan is to make sure that more people know about the Radcliffe Institute and are able to experience the good work that we do. And I am especially proud of the partnerships that we've developed through emerging leaders with local schools. The high school students who are a part of that program are drawn from Cambridge Ridge and Latin School and Prospect Hill Academy, which is a charter school. And I'm just happy that we've been able to forge those relationships and thus be of service to the greater Boston community. Jessica.
Thank you. Another question. I think this is our final one, maybe one more after this. Besides Constance Baker Motley, who are your role models?
So that's a great question. There have been many across my life, my professional life. I've been blessed to have had many mentors and sponsors and role models. I think of Robert Carter, for whom I clerked on that same court, the Southern District of New York. He was a colleague of Constance Baker Motley at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, helped to litigate Brown versus Board of Education. And it was, he was just, he taught me a lot about how to be a lawyer, how to be a professional, how to carry myself. I have professors who taught me and who were important to me and helped me become an academic. I think of Reva Siegel, who was a mentor at Yale Law School, Bill Chafe, who was a mentor at Duke, where I pursued and attained my PhD. So there are quite a few people. whom I have known over the years, who have helped me to become the scholar that I am and an academic administrator.
Well, Tomiko, thank you so much for joining us in conversation today. Do you have any final comments? And then after, we will turn it back over to Philip.
Well, I want to say thank you to the Alumni Association for giving me the opportunity to connect with friends and supporters. I'm delighted to have been in conversation with you, Jessica, in service to Radcliffe. I am passionate about the work that we do at Radcliffe and always delighted to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Philip, you're up.
Thank you so much, Jessica and Tomiko, for that great conversation. And thank you to all of you for joining us. Now that we're actually in spring, we are eagerly looking forward to your return to campus for reunions in June. And it's exciting to actually be able to say that after 2 years. And I apologize earlier for the technical glitches tied to the video. We're going to try and show it now to close out the program. God willing and technology demons willing that it'll work. The joys of virtual programming, but it does get to bring us all together. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, Tomiko and Jessica, for that wonderful conversation. And let's hope we can show this wonderful video about celebrating Radcliffe's 20th anniversary and looking forward.
I'm honored to celebrate our 20th anniversary with you. The Institute we know today would be nothing without the rich history on which it was founded. This is a history that I, as Dean, will ensure remains an integral part of our future. For more than a century, Radcliffe College was synonymous with excellence and a commitment to the education of women. The college was created by pioneers in coeducation, and it graduated scholars in all disciplines. Its alumni stand as leaders in their fields. And the college's Bunting Institute, celebrating its 60th anniversary this year, provided women with protected time and space to pursue ambitious research and creative work. The Radcliffe Institute was created as a bold experiment, building on this remarkable past. In its first dean, Drew Gilpin Faust, the Institute found a champion who valued both history and the education and empowerment of women. What has become clearer with time is that the invaluable legacy of Radcliffe College is not merely coeducation at Harvard. Rather, it is the recognition that universities will always be greater when they draw wisdom and talent from the widest possible pool of individuals. Still today, the Radcliffe Institute is driven by this commitment to inclusion, opportunity, and excellence. We bring together scholars, students, and practitioners to engage with issues that can only be fully understood by drawing on research from the humanities, sciences, social sciences, arts, and the professions. By fostering inquiry across traditional boundaries, we ignite creativity and drive innovation. What unites the Radcliffe community is our shared conviction that open intellectual exchange can reveal powerful new insights. Indeed, our approach can even reshape how we understand our place in the galaxy. Radcliffe's work enriches Harvard and our society in countless ways. Our community of Radcliffe Fellows now numbers more than 1,000. They are writers, astronomers, physicians, historians, artists, diplomats, and so much more. Their work reverberates around the world. Our legacy of inclusion is reflected in our long-standing commitment to helping Harvard secure a more diverse faculty by recruiting top candidates as Radcliffe professors. Students find in the Radcliffe Institute unique intellectual and mentorship opportunities to enrich their education. Here they explore the Schlesinger archives, pursue research, help shape major public programs, and work alongside world-class scientists, award-winning novelists, and other luminaries. Radcliffe allows countless faculty to pursue ambitious new ideas and to share them with the public. And the Institute's work is enriched in turn by the thousands of guests who participate in our events, in person and online, to learn about and discuss path-breaking research and transformative ideas. Throughout its long history, Radcliffe has been animated by the ideals of inclusion, opportunity, and excellence. These same core values must and will guide our work as we enter the Institute's third decade. We never imagined we would be setting out to write the Institute's next chapter against the backdrop of a global pandemic. But we know that no matter what the future brings, we will work together to ensure the principles that informed our founding and which have characterized our work over the past 20 years remain at the heart of what we do. Thank you for being a part of the vibrant Radcliffe community.
Thank you again, everybody, and we'll see you in June.